Today's topic is innovative way to fight climate change in India. Hello, everyone. Happy to be with you once again. Today we have with us a young, enterprising Indian, Pradyot Porwal. He is engaged in developing carbon credits in an innovative way and selling them. So he's a carbon project developer. Let's hear from him what it really is instead of my telling you. Over to you, Pradyot.
Thank you so much, Subodh, and happy to be here. As you described, we originate and develop carbon credit projects at a very high level. I think in very simplistic terms, if you think about it, one of the main problems with climate change is too much greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. And one of the most basic things to sort of address that challenge is to grow lots of trees. Now, that solution type is categorized as terrestrial nature-based solutions. And our intention at Hasten, at the company where I work and I've sort of co-founded, is to develop landscape level institutionally investable nature-based projects. What that means is that we are looking at really restoring vast amounts of wastelands and degraded lands. And in that process, we sort of recreate or at least attempt to recreate existing natural forests that we have lost over past several decades, if not centuries. And in the process, we end up, one of the byproducts is removal of atmospheric carbon. At the same time, there are several other positive environmental co-benefits that we end up generating in the form of increased biodiversity, better soil conditions, improved water retention, and so on and so forth, which are all sort of eligible to be paid within this developing field of nature or climate financing. So the first sort of product that we sort of generate as a byproduct of our activity is our carbon credits, which can be bought by large institutional corporates and organizations that have a high carbon footprint and are looking for offsetting or insetting solutions. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So
I'll
you
maybe just
grow
pause there.
trees, you grow
Yeah.
trees so that others can say, listen, they are capturing the carbon, so I don't have to, I'll pay them to do it. Instead, I have to do what I have to do. And so they are doing my job for me and I'll pay them for it, right? Basically, that's how the scheme works, right?
Simply
Okay,
put,
fine.
yes.
All right, okay, let's continue. How did you get here?
Great.
What are you actually doing? Some examples, etc. You know what I'm after, so please continue.
Yeah. So I think like there are like growing trees for like, let's say, purifying air or water and all that sort of stuff is not a very novel concept, right? It's existed for many, many centuries. The big sort of challenge right now with respect to sort of nature restoration is how it gets financed, right? And the carbon markets are only sort of one of the ways to sort of do that. And it's one of the most advanced mechanisms that exist right now. If you think about it, the primary sort of challenge with respect to climate change is like, or rather the causes in my mind, because I come from with a very sort of financial and economic viewpoint at this problem, is the inherent negative externality embedded in our accounting and economic systems. And carbon is just one of the sort of mechanisms through which you can measure and quantify that negative externality. But at the same time, there are other payments for ecosystem services markets that are being developed currently. For example, biodiversity credits, water credits, and so on and so forth, which will also start putting a dollar value on the negative or positive biodiversity impact that any corporations as a course of their regular business are going to have, or what are the sort of water impact do they have on fresh water or in terms of water pollution, and so on and so forth. So the key element with respect to the change that we have seen in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years with respect to afforestation, reforestation-based projects is that now there is an increased demand from the existing businesses that have high carbon footprint to actually find projects that are worthy of their investments so that they can find carbon offsets through that. And this becomes a market-based business transaction as opposed to, let's say, relying on a lot of philanthropic donations or corporate social responsibility, which was the route that typically people would take 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they still continue to do take. The other key difference as a result of this shift that's also happened is that the pool of financing available for these types of projects is a few orders of magnitude different, right? I mean, when a company is, let's say, looking for CSR spending, in India, at least the regulation states that they need to spend 2% of their annual profits in CSR activities, and only a slice of that actually goes into environment-based projects.
Right.
So, and whereas when you start looking at any company's business transaction or expense bucket, that is at least 50 times larger than the 2% of the profits, or if not, like potentially even more. So the amounts of capital that can actually now flow into projects like these is vastly greater.
Yeah.
The challenge on the origination or supply side is that most people are not used to utilizing those vast sums of money in a highly responsible manner and ensure that the desired outcomes or projected outcomes are achieved throughout the life of these long-term projects, which is where sort of the gap that we are trying to fill in, and we are developing these projects pretty much as any large infrastructure project is developed with a long-term view in a highly responsible manner, where all the key risks are mitigated sufficiently such that institutional investors feel comfortable actually owning some of these natural capital assets.
Yeah, okay, I get it. I mean, there's only so much you can do with donated money, but this is business, and it's big business because not only India, but it's global. You can sell your credits anywhere in the world and to any company in the world. So it's big business, and it's big money flowing possibly to support large scale reforestation, afforestation, whatever it is that you are calling. And basically, it's like economics had neglected the environmental damage, and now we are creating a market so that the environmental damage can be undone. Okay, good. And you are an active participant in doing it. All right, let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, so traditionally, if you sort of look at the players who have operated in the field of carbon credit origination or supply, typically end up being either large international nonprofit organizations or timber corporations. Like both of those have had, during their regular course of business or work, planted trees over the years, and then suddenly realized that, okay, this is a mechanism for us to also sort of monetize some of that work and get back some of the sort of donation or the expenses that we've made over the years. The key challenge with the existing sort of players is that neither of their business models or sort of organizational models are suited to actually optimize for climate outcomes. Right? Nonprofits typically are sort of used to taking donor money and spending it with a limited period of accountability ascribed to their work in terms of monitoring and measurement. And usually, like even if the outcomes are not met, don't necessarily have sufficient accountability or any liability on the back of that because of the nature of their business. Whereas timber companies primarily are motivated by timber-based yield, and carbon credits is only a very small percentage of revenues that they would make. So they end up planting monoculture plantations, or at best a 2 or 3 sort of different species, which have a high degree of either timber value or some sort of wood value if they're in, let's say, in paper or pulp business, and so on and so forth. So in neither of these two cases, they end up sort of maximizing for the carbon sequestration potential, or even the biodiversity benefits which are desirable of climate projects. And hence, I think in our business model, what we've sort of made a conscious decision is to rely as much as possible on just these payments for ecosystem services markets, so that there is incentive alignment between the capital that's going to be invested as well as the needs of the environment. And one sort of very happy coincidence of this work also ends up being that it is highly socially relevant work as well. The communities where afforestation is happening, they tend to enjoy not just the fruits of the plants or trees that are planted, but also a whole host of other positive environmental and health related benefits, as well as certain economic benefits indirectly as a result of this activity, right? So this is like one of those rare sort of fields that I personally sort of got attracted to, because there is a very sort of nice intersection of a whole host of positive benefits as well as financial incentive alignment.
Okay, good. So we understand the business that you are in. Now, how did you get here and what's your future? Because you are still young and we want to know how you got here into this business and what's your future. You're a co-founder, you said. So is this a startup? Where are you? How did you get here? Where are you going? So personal. Let's hear that side of the story.
Right. So how I fell into this is a little bit of a random walk. But effectively, what I studied was electrical engineering. I did my undergrad in that. And then after that, I went straight to business school and ended up in, as most people would with background like me, in the finance world. So I was started my career with UBS in Hong Kong, and then moved on to Wells Fargo, spent a good part of 6 years there. So all in all, about a 10-year stint trading fixed income products. And it was the pandemic which is sort of really sort of accelerated my thought process and reevaluation of my priorities. When I started sort of actively thinking about the emerging field of sustainable finance and how that is sort of trying to address the existing shortcomings of our current financial system and current economic system. Climate change was obviously sort of an emerging field that a lot of people became a lot more aware during the pandemic. And I started going deeper into the intersection of the two, looking at various types of climate solutions and sustainability based solutions. And there are quite a few good sort of areas where a lot of people are doing good work. Most of that work, in my assessment at the time, was that is happening in at a small scale in niches and pockets, and especially in the private markets side, because most of the organizations are still quite young, and they haven't sort of reached a scale where there may be any meaningful opportunities on the public market side, which is most of my career had been. So that is when I made a conscious sort of decision to switch and start going deeper into the climate change and climate financing intersection points. So that's when I sort of quit my job and moved back to India. And I chanced upon my co-founders just by talking to a bunch of friends and got introduced to them. They had a very sort of complicated, like complementary skill set to mine. They came from the nonprofit background or the design background, had been working on the problem for a few years, had gained a bit of operational expertise as well over the years, and had been thinking about very similar lines as I was, but just from a different sort of angle. So it was a happy coincidence, and then we all decided that we wanted to work together. So we are, yes, to respond to you, a startup. We incorporated in India early last year, and we've been sort of developing projects, large scale carbon offsetting or insetting projects. Um, ever since, we've established a bunch of partnerships. Two of our projects are in sort of advanced talks with a few carbon investors for pre-financing arrangements. At the same time, we have also now been doing a lot of urban forestry execution work through CSR partners, because in most Indian cities also sort of are realizing that they need a higher increased sort of green cover, and there is a lot more awareness within the population as well to actually start paying for it. So either the municipalities are attributing budgets to it, or a lot of corporate CSR money is being diverted towards it, and government is actively sort of trying to encourage greening of urban spaces as well. So we undertake sort of a bunch of those contracts as well, with execution plus a 3-year monitoring and maintenance period to ensure that we achieve the desired success and outcome. And after that, more or less, those trees are, or those sort of what we call as urban forests, are self-sustaining.
Okay, so who is doing the implementation on these contracts? You? You have
Yes.
technical people whom you have hired basically, or you contract
Yes.
it out, or it's your own work?
Yes.
Okay.
So most of, I would say, close to 85% of the execution happens in-house, and we have an internal team. There are a few projects where we do partner with some other organizations as well for implementation work, especially in cases when those projects are in new geographies and we don't have sufficient experience executing in it. That's where a real sort of ground expertise and ground organizations can add a lot of value. It also sort of helps everybody develop and sort of increase their overall level of expertise and skill set as well, in terms of sort of doing restoration activity in varying agroclimatic conditions and soil conditions and so on and so forth.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we know how you have got started on this, and how do you see your own future?
Yeah, so for me, this is really a sort of long-term work, right? I mean, the view that we have taken is that climate change is going to be a dominant theme over the next few decades, right? And these are sort of once in a lifetime type of opportunities that we can sort of get involved in. And the way I think about it, like almost 100% of the jobs will need to become climate aligned for us to have sort of any meaningful shot or probability of meeting our climate goals. The amount of sort of climate destruction that we've done just in a short span of last 150 years is incomprehensible in terms of the numbers, and it's very difficult for a human mind to sort of wrap our minds around it. So for us, like at least me personally, the focus really is to create these long-term projects. Each project is a 30-year project for us, and we need to sort of ensure that we are delivering all the credits that we are promising and projecting at this stage. If not, we really want to over deliver those, right? So we see tremendous potential to just grow land restoration business over the next 30-year period, if not longer.
Okay.
In
So you are
addition
in
to
it,
that, yeah.
you are in it for the long haul.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Well, okay, this is very fascinating. Any final thoughts you have for the viewers?
I mean, as I said, I think the way I think about it, irrespective of what line of work you may be in right now, at some stage, everything will need to sort of start aligning with the overall climate goals. So I would really encourage everyone to sort of actively and consciously think about the problem of climate change and where is the intersection between your everyday work and any of the climate positive solution sets that you may think of. And there are plenty of nice tools and resources available these days to actually reskill and upskill yourselves within that, which should really hold people in good stead as more and more people start looking at implementation and development of climate solutions.
So are there good paying jobs for young people?
There are surprisingly a few, yes, yes. I mean, the entire financial industry has been on a big hiring spree to sort of attract talent that understand the problem well, especially from academia. At the same time, in the last 3 odd years, we have seen tremendous increase in the posts of, let's say, chief sustainability officer in all public corporations, and they have been actively building their teams because there is a very clear need, both regulatory as well as from investors and customers, on public corporations to sort of start talking about their climate nature impact as well as measure those and be transparent about those. So these two sectors have seen the most amount of bull run in the last 2 3 years in terms of jobs, and like pretty decent paying jobs. And from my sort of vantage point, I also see a lot of new startups getting funded in climate tech or climate change space, who have also been expanding teams. So there are a few very sort of focused and dedicated job portals, platforms, communities, which are a sort of very good way to start networking, get into the information flow, find the right resources to learn, as well as talk to some of the potential recruiters and find a way in. I mean, ever since sort of I moved into space, I've been having at least 4 to 5 conversations every week with people who have been interested in making that switch from a regular corporate job into the climate space.
Okay, that's wonderful. So can I summarize it in this way, that there are jobs on the buyer side and there are jobs on the seller side, both sides?
Yep.
Yeah, the buyers want to have experts who can look at what is being sold, and the sellers want to have people who can shape the product and sell it, because in the end, you're not selling trees, you are selling their ability to absorb carbon, and you need to have that product ready in the marketplace. All right, thank you. This is very, very exciting and very, very innovative of you to be doing it. And thank you for coming here. Let's say bye to the viewers. Maybe we'll catch up with you in a year to see where you are and how your business is going. Let's say bye to them. Bye, everybody. Next time, I hope to have another such person. And bye till then.